Listen, shout out to Beavers every time.
Justin Bieber.
Justin Bieber, that was the name of the first one, innit?
We have 500,000 Londoners with stunted lungs, so many young people across our city. Like, I grew up with asthma, never been able to breathe the full capacity of the lung because of something that they didn't create in the first place. Expert scientists told him it's going to take 193 years. We've achieved it in just 9 years.
9 years.
Why wouldn't you want to live in a city where you got better air quality?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to live in a city where you got more better access to green space?
I can't wait to receive my unlimited Oyster card in the post.
I don't even get one.
Damn.
Yeah.
Please mind the gap.
When I was growing up in Kentish Town, North London, the climate and environment was something that we weren't really chatting about. It's not that we didn't care, it just felt like that was a side of London that wasn't necessarily for us. But as a musician and studying zoology, I soon realized the natural world can coexist with the city landscape, and the decisions that are made about London and how we connect to nature is going to affect our future. I'm Louis VI, and I try and connect people to nature through sound. This is Mind the Gap. I'm going to sit down at this beautiful tube station with Mete Coban, the Deputy Mayor of the Environment and Energy, to chat about some of his amazing policies and some of his work to make this a cleaner, greener city for all, not just some of us.
Please mind the gap.
Mete, I'm really gassed to be speaking to you. Thanks so much for coming through. I've got so much to chat to you about TfL, about London, but I really want to get to know your story first. You grew up in London and you were, what was the youngest councillor in Hackney at 21. I want to know, what kind of led you to want to bring about positive change in London and especially around climate and equality in this city?
Yeah, look, I mean, firstly, this is like proper weird, isn't it? Like, we're like next to on a platform.
It doesn't get more TfL than this, really, does it?
Yeah, it's very TfL vibes. It's getting very TfL. But no, look, I mean, I'm not really someone who kind of, if I'm being honest, like really grew up thinking about the environment. But I also think that climate change doesn't impact everyone equally. And I think that when you look at what's happening around the world right now, where it's the volatile energy markets, because we're dependent on fossil fuels, and every time something happens around the world, it's working class Londoners, communities like mine, who are paying higher prices because we're dependent on oil and gas. Or the fact that, having access to a garden, for example, we can see loads of greenery, is a luxury for a lot of Londoners. Or the fact that, we have 500,000 Londoners with stunted lungs, so many young people across our city. Like, I grew up with asthma, never been able to breathe the full capacity of the lung because of something that they didn't create in the first place. So for me, it's like sometimes when you think about the environment, you're thinking, these conversations weren't really meant to be for people like us to engage in, but actually it's very much about our communities. And so I only got into it very later on in life. Like, I'll be honest with you, like maybe in my late 20s, I started to think, oh, this thing called climate change, environment, why is this important? And then I was like, oh wow, like we're really missing out here and we're really being hard done by. And then it's thinking, okay, but who's the actual voice for people like us from these communities? And so that's when I started to take more keen interest in it. Yeah,
I mean, it's a good point. I mean, I set up something exactly because of that called Nature Ain't a Luxury, because it's a necessity, but exactly like, we're not the typical environmentalists that you would see usually on the screen and throughout the ages, but it's our communities that we represent that are on the front line of it. Exactly as you say, I also got asthma, so we've got a lot in common, both from North London, but it's...
Both Arsenal fans?
Both Arsenal fans, yeah. Come on, I really struggled to not put my shirt on today, but I didn't want to stick it out.
We should have done it together, man. Yeah, we should have just done, forget the Mind the Gap podcast, this should be like Arsenal TfL. Arsenal takes over TfL.
I'm down, man. We'll make that happen next. That's on the next one. It's so interesting because, we get exposed unequally to the negative effects of climate change, to excess heat and to pollution. So where does transport come into that for you? Okay, an interesting fact maybe that will go from it that I only just learned, I'm sure you've known, but TfL is one of the biggest landowners in London. So what can we do with that space to help make London better for people and our communities?
I think TfL has a huge role to play because actually when you talk about space, when we were growing up in London, I think one of the special things about our city is that like there was a real sense of belonging to your community, whether it was like your youth club, your estate, your community, like going to your neighbour's home for dinner, like the playgrounds. And in some ways, I feel like people don't have that no more. Like that's kind of like community isn't there no more, right? For all sorts of reasons that are like beyond, and you know, like life is changing, technology's changed a lot of things, everything's changing, right? And I think, you know, what we have a big duty to play in is that it's about how we democratize our public spaces to work for people.
Yeah.
And that's where I think TfL could play a huge role when it comes to thinking about actually, you know, we spent the centuries rewilding our city, disconnecting people from nature. And I think after the pandemic, people really grew to appreciate their green spaces, especially like if you're stuck in the tower block, for example, you don't have a garden, like that has a huge impact on your mental health. And so I think there's a big role for, you know, for organizations like TfL to step up and say, okay, do you know what? Like, obviously we're here to keep Londoners moving, but we also want to do it in a way where we create a long-term sustainable city. So, you know, TfL's role in cleaning our air in London has been transformational. You know, like we clean London's air 200 years earlier than what experts predicted, for example. That now means like 10 million Londoners are now breathing cleaner air because of direct TfL policies. And so your point about like the role that TfL can play is huge. Like the work they're doing on energy, I think TfL is like, probably, if I'm being honest, like the mayor's biggest kind of like, I guess like lever in terms of like actually helping reach our wider environmental ambitions.
So Mete, your family moved here in the 90s seeking asylum. I was wondering if there's like, is there a connection between what kind of triggered you to do your work and creating like a safe space in the city and a place that has a future for everyone? And is it connected to your story?
Yeah, 100%. Like, you know, when we first came here from Northern Cyprus, I was about 2 and a bit, about going to 3 years old. And we were very lucky because when we came, I feel like the mood of the country is very different to what it is now.
Yeah.
In a way where, you know, like I feel like, you know, regardless of like national policies, there was a real sense of like community, of compassion, of love. But the world feels very different now.
Very different.
Right? And so for me, it's like, when we're thinking about what type of city do we want to build, and this is something that the mayor is very passionate about, when he's talking about delivering a fairer and greener London, it's not just about like, there's one thing to deliver policies, right? But how you deliver the policies is equally as important. And what I mean by that is how do you create a sense of ownership over the mission you're trying to create across our city? Because actually, if you get the how you work with communities properly, then people will feel like they've got a stake in it. And then that's how you get the sense of belonging. And that's how you get the sense of like, you know, like this is actually my city. And then you know what? Like all of these greenery and stuff that we have, you don't have to rely on TfL or your council or the city to come and look after it. Londoners themselves will do it. Because why? Because they feel like they've been part of the process and actually designing it and being involved in the inception of it. So I think, you know, like all of those things go hand in hand. And for sure, it goes back to like, you know, my story. It goes back to, you know, I got in politics very young. I was 21 when I was elected. I got into politics. I hated politics growing up. That's why I got into politics. If I'm honest, like 12, 13 years on, I probably still hate politics. And I hated politics because for me, it was like, you know, like, I don't want to be a politician that I grew up hating. How do we make sure that, you know, like, if I'm thinking about young Mete, young Louis, for example, like, what does the future for London look for them?
Like we're sitting here talking about TfL during London Climate Action Week, and it's all good. So we clearly get it. But what would you say to like a 17-year-old kid that grows up in Tottenham, where I live, that says they have no interest in climate change or what it will do to them? They have no concept. How do you bring people like that on board that feels it doesn't apply to them?
There's this mantra that I always go by. If you don't do politics, politics will do you.
Facts. Right? Louder for those in the back.
And that's because, you know, like, this is your city. Yeah? For too long, too many of us have just accepted things to being done to us rather than actually, like, taking up our seat on the table. We don't have to be invited all the time. That was the choice that I made. I had, for example, when I was growing up. It's like, it was a choice which was, you know what, either you could just accept the way things are and just leave it and just complain about it, or you could say, do you know what, things are bad, I'm gonna get involved, try to do something about it. Also recognizing that you might not be able to fix it, but I'd rather be in the room trying to get what I can for my community. And so I think, you know, like, look, we live in the greatest city in the world. We're a city that is taking climate action very seriously. We here, like whether it's me, whether it's Sadiq, or whether it's other politicians in London, we're here accountable to you. You literally pay our wages. We are elected by you to like, you're here to hold us to account. So like, you know, when you see us, Mete, what's going on? Don't be afraid to ask those questions. You're not being impolite. You're literally like, that is literally my job.
Yeah. On that note, my brethren would kill me if I didn't ask, can you make the Vicky line not so squeaky? And when is AC coming to the tube? Well, I mean, jokes aside, with scientists saying that by 2050 about, London could have the same climate as Barcelona.
Yeah.
What is TfL and what are you and Sadiq Khan doing to make sure that London can adapt to that kind of future?
Last year was the hottest year ever on record. Yeah, and our city isn't built to sort of cope with that level of heat. Climate change is impacting us here and now. Yeah, and the reality is, it's those who are younger children, those who've got underlying health conditions, are elderly. They're the ones who are going to be suffering most. Or if you live in a council estate with like really bad damp and mold, your property is going to be like really hot, for example.
How high you live on that council estate as well.
And then in the winter, it'll be very cold, and then you're going to have to make a different choice between either heating or eating. So it occupies a big part of my mind. And so there's a number of things that we're doing. So there's some stuff in the immediate term, which is about making sure that, for example, Londoners have the, like, you know, we're adapting London. So part of that is about actually investing more and more into green spaces. So we created like the equivalent of 2,000 football pitch of green spaces across our city. More than 640,000 trees, and they're really important because they create shading. We're looking at more nature-based solutions, so like beavers, for example. And beavers are amazing because they build these like flood defenses. But then also like water fountains. So we've got over 100 water fountains, 4,000 water refill points. We're doing a lot around the immediate term. And then we've got like a cool spaces map as well, where Londoners could go there and see where you can go keep cool, for example, when it's hot, yeah? Now in the long term, what we have to think about is how do we kind of like retrofit our existing buildings, so our older buildings that ain't built to cope. So that's like thinking about insulation, so they could be both cooler, but also warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. And also be more energy efficient as well, and they can save energy bills, money as well. We've got to be thinking about our transport system. So one of the things that me and Sadiq have been doing with TfL, which has been like really successful, is we've got this power purchase agreement. So it's thinking about how we basically invest in renewable energy in the long term. We also recently announced a new solar private wire, which powers our tube. So we spoke about Victoria Line, but it's the equivalent of basically powering 26,000 homes and powering the tube, the Vicky Line, for 9 months.
Wow.
Now we've still got a long way to go, but what I'm trying to say is that basically TfL has a huge role to play in thinking about how we adapt our city, how we think about energy generation, how we think about what does our stations look like. You know, like earlier, about a week or two ago, I was at a visit at a Hatton Cross station, again, not too far from here. We basically, outside the station, we've put loads of new ultra rapid chargers for, you know, like your ambulances, like near the airport, which is Heathrow Airport, or like your taxis, they can go and charge their cars. And they can get around, and people can get around in a much more, you know, equitable and sustainable way.
Something that I always say that kind of comes into my work is like planetary health and our health go hand in hand. And with over 55% of us globally living in cities, it's only going to go up. It's all right speaking about rewilding in the countryside, but if where the majority of people are is in cities, we need to talk about rewilding our urban spaces. And I think exactly as you touched on before, like our urban centres have been almost antagonistic to the word nature. It doesn't need, just because it's been that way doesn't mean it needs to be that way. I'm a musician, but I'm also a zoologist. So it goes without saying that, like, I'm going to be really interested in biodiversity and how you're going to bring nature in. As we touched on earlier, that TfL has got a massive amount of land use in London. And you mentioned the beavers. Listen, shout out to beavers every time.
Justin Bieber.
Justin Bieber, that was the name of the first one, isn't it? I've heard white storks are also possibly coming back for the first time in 600 years. What is other biodiversity, and tell us about the white storks, but what are the other biodiversity targets that we can do to make London not just green, but biodiverse?
It comes back to for who, for me, right? It's like, if you think about London spatially, 47% of London is green. It's a very green city.
Very green.
Yeah? But actually only about 20% of it is accessible to the public.
Where's the access to that?
Yeah. So the question is about, for who is it green? Right? Who has access to all of these like green spaces? And actually sometimes like we get really obsessed by big parks or like big things, and that's really important, right? But it's also about how you change the look and feel of the city by, it's the little bits of interventions, but together it makes a big difference. Now, one of the things that I'm proud about London is we're the first national park city in the world, 2019. One of 4 cities in the world. And a big part of what we're trying to do through what we call the Green Roots Fund, so that's how we're funding more beavers, the white storks come back to London after 600 years, is thinking about how do we empower local community groups. And it goes back to that point I was saying about how do you create that sense of ownership of London among communities. So rather than us being like, oh, we've got like 5 big project ideas, me and Sadiq's got 5 big project ideas, saying, no, look, let's flip it. We'll provide the money, yeah? You bid for like lots of projects. So we develop a pipeline of projects from our city, from community groups, from all over London, all 32 boroughs of London. We can only do that by empowering local communities.
Yeah, something I think about a lot. So my work, I try and reconnect people to nature through sound, which sounds obvious as a musician, but like we are, as humans, we are all fluent in this language of nature because we all come from a long line of listeners.
100%.
If our ancestors didn't listen, they wouldn't be here. So we are all the ones that survived because we knew how to listen to nature. And it's only in recent history that we've been living in cities and kind of followed this path of like urbanization without nature. But it feels like everyone's waking up to that.
Yeah.
People like you and Sadiq in positions of power, I feel like we have a chance. And I make music with field recordings, and first off, we got to get my field recordings playing at every London tube station. Let's go get birdsong. But on a serious note, like the sound of nature and the sound of birdsong doesn't just feel good to hear, but it actually has physiological mental
can I give you an
benefits.
example?
Yeah, go ahead.
When I first became deputy mayor, they took me to Croydon.
Yeah.
I think it was New Addington they took me to. There was like a nature reserve. And I went with London Wildlife Trust. So I went there.
Shout out to London Wildlife Trust.
Shout out to them.
I'm an ambassador there actually now.
Are you?
Yeah.
They're sick. And we went on to the nature reserve, and David Mooney, who's the chief executive,
Yeah.
he's like standing next to me, he's talking. I'm zoned out at this point. And I goes to him, like, David, one sec, stop, 1 second, yeah? And I was like, I don't mean to be rude. But I can't explain to you, yeah, but it was just a different level of like calmness that I had. Just the kind of sound of nature.
We all need that.
It brought so much calm to my mental like well-being in that moment.
We all need that, particularly people in poor areas like that don't have that immediate access to green spaces, need it arguably the most. And it exists. Nature's incredible. As soon as you give it a little, it comes back a lot. And like the Dawn Chorus this spring has been amazing, even in London. And what it lowers your cortisol levels, lowers your blood pressure, all these mental health problems, and also things like neurodiversity is so good for ADHD that, and I have that too. Most of us, so many of us have that. And natural sound does a lot. So
the way you're like articulating it is the way we need to think, which is sometimes I feel like we're kind of too reactive to things on a day-to-day basis. Yeah?
So true.
And when we think about this question about London, I think we got to think big picture, because for a lot of people, it's like when you say something like that, the first thing will be like, it's a very British thing, isn't it? We're like, okay, yeah, but like, if it hasn't been done like that before, how could we do it? Leave it. Let's just follow what we've done before.
Don't stand above the parapet.
Yeah, and it's like, actually, no, we need to dream big, because actually we're living in extraordinary times, and no longer, like all of these same solutions that we've had before, it's not working no more. Do you know? And it's like, we've got to think bigger. And I also think that like the whole nature and like the wider climate debate, we treat it as a separate conversation around standard of living or affordability. And it's all one. Sometimes like, and this is what, I think TfL does an incredible job around the visibility, and it can bring visibility about the actions we're taking. And like, like even like some of the stations where you see like the murals or all of the things, like a storytelling element, and connecting people to their stations. But also like, as you can see with these, like the greenery, like we've got loads of wildflower verges, for example, that TfL is putting out there. Like there's loads of good work that TfL is doing, and it kind of increases that kind of visibility, right? But then your point is about like, actually this is about undoing the injustice that has been done for decades. We're not just doing this because we want to protect our planet. Of course we are, because obviously otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation. But also like, why wouldn't you want to live in a city where you got better air quality?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to live in a city where you got more better access to green space? Why wouldn't you want to live in a city, for example, where you've got like, you know, cleaner, greener energy, which it's cheaper for you? You know, like, why wouldn't you want to live in a city where, like, actually it's a better place to live? Like, you're not just living there to work. And that's the thing, people always say, you know, oh, if you don't like it, go outside to a countryside where you can enjoy greenery. It's like, yeah, but not a lot of people have that choice.
Yeah.
My parents can't just say, oh, I'm going to leave my social housing now,
Yeah.
walk up, go rent or buy a property elsewhere. You can't just do that. Do you know what I mean? So for a lot of people, it's like, we can't just accept these bad standards that we've accepted for too long. Like the fact that if you're brought up in one part of London because the air quality is bad in comparison to another one means that your life expectancy is going to be lower.
A lot lower, yeah.
Like, how could that be? How are we comfortable with that?
Yeah.
You know? And so for me,
shouldn't be.
it's like, that point about justice needs to come through.
And I mean, there's a long list of things to talk about, whether it's from ULEZ to clean energy to drainage systems and electric buses. But for you, what are the things you think have been most important in making real change for TfL, but also wider London?
So, look, I think the work that TfL has done in terms of improving our air quality should not be understated, yeah? Like, London has always been a city that has always been known the city of pollution.
Big smoke.
Big smoke, exactly. And when Sadiq first got elected in 2016, expert scientists told him it's going to take 193 years if we carry on the same way we are and don't change anything to clean our air, right? We've achieved it in just 9 years.
9 years.
9 years,
That's
imagine.
serious. Yeah.
Now, that's happened not because, you know, like things just happen that way. It happened because, you know, firstly, we delivered the world's largest clean air zone, the ultra low emission zone. But we also, for example, supported Londoners with a scrappage scheme with the older cars, for example, where you can either get cash or get a new car, for example. 54,000 Londoners benefited from that. And that's, again, embedding social justice principles at the heart of our ULEZ scheme, yeah?
Yeah.
Then you think about our zero emission buses, 3,000 zero emission buses. Or if you think about what we're doing around our black taxi fleet, my dad's a cab driver, for example, right?
Yeah.
72% of our black taxi fleet is zero emission capable. Or if you think about electric vehicle charging points, more than 28,000 electric vehicle chargers, for example. So like, the work that TfL is doing is incredible because actually it's just like, these are things that you could feel and see. It's like visibility. Like
100%.
the work we're doing around improving more cycling infrastructure. It's like, a lot of us here, like, you know what it is, yeah? People get really like, and you will understand this. When we were growing up, everyone cycles, isn't it? Like, you know, you cycle in the flats or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then as you get older, you see a lot of people not cycling no more. Why? Because it's like, cycling to work, recycling in your ends is different, right? And the reason why is because people don't feel safe, for example.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like people always want to try create this or that, or just because you're pro cycling or you're anti-car. It's like, no. Like, why shouldn't we live in a city where, for example, if you do like cycling, you should also have the option, it's cheaper to travel.
Yeah.
And it's healthier for you. And I'll say this like respectfully, this is about congestion, yeah? Now, people like my dad, your plumbers, your electricians, people who need to drive.
Yeah, need it.
Taxi drivers, buses, right? If we had more people, for example, either taking buses, public transport, cycling, reducing traffic, do you know what that means? That means that people who need to drive, working people, get around much more quicker. Instead, they're stuck in traffic because basically we've got excess cars here in London. And then obviously that contributes to air quality and all that sort of stuff. But it's not about being this or that. Like, we need to stop this culture of like, just because you're pro cycling or you're anti-car, or because you're pro car, does that mean you're anti-cycling? No, it's like, why can't we have the best buses, zero emission buses, the best zero emission taxis or cars, loads of cycle lanes, all of this. And I think that's what TfL is trying to do.
Yeah. You know, like, I love cycling from back in the day in the ends where you'd be back in all your people. But to now, it's a beautiful way to get around. And
Do you know what I can't do though? I don't know if you remember this, yeah? You know, like we used to have like BMX bikes.
Yeah.
So I used to have BMX bikes and you can cycle like standing.
Yeah.
I can't do that no more, man.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like, you know, like when I was younger, I was like, how was I so good at doing it now? And if I tried to do it now, it just don't work.
Cycle safe, helmets and everything. Don't be too cool for a helmet.
And knee pads.
Oh, that's too far. That's too far for me. When we're thinking about climate change, there's obviously massive milestones coming. It was particular for you guys, for TfL, reducing emissions, zero emission bus fleet, biodiversity net gain, and also the big one, which is getting net zero greenhouse gas emissions across all operations by 2040. But yeah, I mean, that's a lot. I wonder if it keeps you awake at night. But what is it that you're excited about now?
Yeah, so look, I mean, sometimes when you got these like strategies and targets, you forget that what you're talking about ultimately is, again, that point about the type of city we want to build and about people, right? And so there's two things that I'm working on right now that I think that is very exciting. And I think you've got to sometimes take things at a step without, like, so it's like, what are the things we can do now? Like, the first thing is, how do we work with Londoners? And so obviously today, for example, or this week, you know, we've got the London Climate Action Week, of course. And as part of that, we've got the Youth Summit. And that's basically around how do we work with young Londoners in a way to shape London's climate action plan. And that's really important because I think Youth Voice is such an important part of that. This is the generation who's going to be most impacted by the decisions that we take now. You know, 10, 15 years later on, they're going to be like, what sort of city or planet did you leave us? What we announced this week is also London's new heat plan. And London's new heat plan is looking at, for example, the health sector, the built environment, transport, all of these different areas. So TfL feeds into it as well. And it's basically thinking about how do we adapt London to the heat pressures that we're going to start seeing in London. So how do we make sure that workers, for example, whilst you're out working, you're working in safer conditions? Or how do we think about, for example, you know, Londoners who live on our estates or whatever it is, you know, are able to enjoy our city, continue enjoying our city without overheating and obviously all the negative health impacts that come with that as well. So these are two things that I think that we're working on just this week alone that I think in the long term will have a big difference.
I want to transport your mind to London 15 years or so from now. So it's like 2041. What does it feel like? What does it sound like? If everything you're planning and trying to do comes to reality, what is London then?
So the first thing is, by 2041, I would have liked to seen Arsenal win another 15 Premier League titles.
Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know.
So that would be great.
Easily.
Champions League under our belt as well. That would be amazing. No, but look, in all seriousness, you know, air quality I spoke about, which is really important. You know, we want to make sure that our hospital GP admissions are down related to respiratory health issues caused by pollution. We want to make sure that the point that you were making earlier about actually how do we change the look and feel of the city by investing more into green spaces. So nature doesn't become a luxury, but actually something that all Londoners can enjoy, whether it's in terms of sound, whether it's in terms of like being able to see it or being able to access it. We want to make sure that Londoners aren't, you know, impacted by volatile fossil fuel market prices. And so as much as we can do to make London fossil fuel free by investing more in renewable energy. So actually we've got cheaper energy, affordable energy, but also it's good for our environment and thinking about our public assets as well. How do we create a sense of like also, you know, London is feeling like more community energy groups, more community groups. That's the sort of London that I want to see in 2041. There's only so much we can do. Yeah, like in order for us to be successful, we need people like you, we need your ideas. So I guess like the call to action I've got to people watching this as well, including to yourself, is like, if you've got ideas, what can I do to help you, enable you, that can help contribute to that 2041 vision that we're just talking about?
Yeah, well, there's definitely talk and make that happen. And Mete, it's been an absolute pleasure, my G. I can't wait to receive my unlimited Oyster card in the post.
I don't even get one.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
But
I knew it didn't
I'll speak to Andy Lords.
We'll chat
I'll
about
ask
it.
him for you.
But thank you so much for today, man. It's been a pleasure, brother.
No, thank you, man. Likewise.
Appreciate ya. This is Mind the Gap, the official podcast from TfL. I've been the guest presenter, Louis VI, and I've been just having the best conversation with Mete Coban. We chatted about community, how we can make this city more green for all, and just the future policies, but also energy that we can bring to this conversation of how to make the natural world more part of this, let's be honest, the best city in the world. It's London Climate Action Week, so find out more that's going on. And if you want more information, look at the show notes. Thanks for listening.